Hi everyone, I'm Sheila. Welcome back to The Truth About Death and Dying. On today's episode, I want to take some time and talk about the aftermath of when someone dies and the grief process, and just give you a little bit of information that I have that I think might be helpful for you if you're in this similar situation. I spoke in earlier podcasts about the training I did and my volunteer work as a facilitator for a group called Pathfinders, located in Bangor, Maine. And I did Pathfinders for several years. I'm not even sure now if it was 7 or 8 years I did that. We did 2 sessions a year, one in the fall and one in the spring. They were 10-week sessions, and my group were the teenagers. But Pathfinders as a whole is the primary goal of it is grief support for children. So if you are an adult who, let's say, lost a child, and you had other children that were grieving in the house, those children we put into proper age groups to grieve and to talk about death with kids their own age, with tools that the facilitators are given to help kind of guide them through the grief process and help them, identify what grief looks like, how to handle it, how to work through it, and the hope is that this will help these children move forward in life and have given them some tools to handle dealing with their grief. If you had a child that died, because you were bringing a child to the group, to Pathfinders, you could be a part of the adult group called Child Loss. And then there was spousal loss and then general loss. So they had groups for adults, but the main point of the group of Pathfinders was for children. So occasionally they would take somebody on that was an adult that just needed some counseling, and it was rare if they turned anyone away, but the focus is for children. And I think children, it's come a long way with grief and acknowledging that children do grieve as well and need help and support in that process. I wanted to speak or tell you the story of, with permission from my ex-husband, Patrick, who lost his mother when he was only 9 years old. And the story is, horrific to me because when I was a child, I was attached at my mother's hip. And if suddenly my mother was gone when I was 9 years old, I honestly don't know how I would have handled that. And back in those days, grief support, it wasn't even a thing, I don't think, or it was very rare if anyone got counseling for, dealing with grief. So my ex-husband, Patrick, was 9 years old. His mother was pregnant with her seventh child. I'm trying to, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, seventh child. And big Catholic family. And his mom went off to the hospital to have the baby, and something went terribly wrong. And I'm not even sure the family knows exactly what happened, but they botched the pregnancy, and his mother ended up dying after giving birth to his new brother. So here his dad is with, 7 children, wife is dead, and suddenly, the weight of the world is on his father. So what happened was Patrick and the 4 oldest boys were sent to Hershey Milton School in Pennsylvania. They were living in D.C. at the time. And they were sent to Milton Hershey in Pennsylvania, an all-boys boarding school. And then his 2 younger sisters were kind of shuffled around amongst relatives. And the new baby was given to Patrick's aunt to take care of. She ended up adopting him and raising him as her own. But so immediately the whole family's just imploded, So he and I would talk about it, especially when I started doing Pathfinders, and I was like, I can't even imagine what that would be like to first of all, lose my mother, because I think my world would have ended right there. It would have been, done for me. But then to lose your father and your sisters and this new baby that you haven't even probably met yet, and suddenly you're being whisked away to the school with your brothers, you're young, you're all young, and the impact that must have had, and he said we didn't know anything else. We had to do what we had to do. And, there was no grief support. There was no counseling. There was no talking to these children about, how you doing? Do you need some help working through this grief, or just have a conversation at all about what they were going through? They've got a double, triple, depends on how you look at it, I guess. But, first they lose their mom and then virtually lose their father and then their sisters. And the sisters have lost their brothers and all the same dynamics. And I just can't even imagine. And I had made the comment to him. I said, well, if your dad could afford to send you 4 boys to Milton Hershey, why didn't he just hire a nanny, keep you all together, and come up that way? But that wasn't the case. They ended up getting like a hardship scholarship fund to Milton Hershey. And the boys spent, I think, 3 years there. And then their dad got remarried and ended up moving to Maine, I should say. And then their stepmom gave birth to another baby. So then there ended up being 8 kids altogether for their dad. But it was just, for me, I was just like, oh my God, I honestly don't know how I would have handled all that, And I think considering all that those children went through, they all turned into like good citizens, good people. I mean, some have issues with drinking and other things, but I think considering the circumstances, they've all done quite well not having any support as children. But I think it just speaks to the importance of getting help for yourself and for the children and other people in your life. I hope you'll check in with each other, and especially the kids, because kids grieve differently. I remember nights at Pathfinder groups, and we would take our kids into the rooms and we would, have our session, and the kids would come out of the group, laughing and, but they're working through their grief in the group. That's what they were there doing, but they're doing it in a different way than adults process it. So at the end of the night, we would all get in a great big circle, do a hand squeeze, and, kind of just reconnect with the group at the end of the night. And, so the kids would come out, laughing and running around and having a good time. And the parents would come out, or grandparents, or whoever was bringing the children, and they would just be drained. You could just tell that they've been crying for the last hour and a half, and just, and I think a lot of times, I could almost see the parents like going, why are these kids running around having fun, But the point is, kids grieve differently. And, if you can get them to talk about it and get them to get those feelings out, it's super important, and it's healthy for them to work through those issues. And the way you grieve and the way your child grieves is probably going to be a lot different. It's going to look a lot different. So it's really important to make sure you're taking care of your own grief and honoring that and whatnot. And I remember, just after my father died, he was renting a home in Bangor, and we had until the first of the new year. He died November 5th, and we had till the first of the year to kind of clean out the house and get things in order. And so that year, 2021, my Patrick and I decided to separate, and my dad died. And the day after my father died, I quit my job for personal reasons, because honestly, I didn't feel supported from my supervisors and whatnot when I was going through this with my father, and I didn't think that they were really being very supportive to me to help me kind of work through this without worrying about finances and other things. But anyway, story for another time. But so after my dad died, I quit my job, and my plan was to just get in my Jeep and drive across the U.S. And I have a lot of friends and family that are scattered all over the United States. And I thought, you know what? I just want some time to myself to be able to just grieve and, pop in and visit for a couple of days with people, have a place to stay, and then just make my way across the country. But in the meantime, I had to settle up my dad's affairs. So, and he was military, he had military retirement and all of this other stuff that I thought would just be a quick fix, but it wasn't. Turns out it took a few months to get that all squared away. In the meantime, my cousin Brian has a home down in Kennebunk that he opened up to me and let me stay there, which was a huge godsend to me, because I hadn't, at this point, I needed some solitude, and it was a godsend. So I remember driving when we finally settled up with the former landlords, and I got in the Jeep and I headed south on 95, and the whole way there, I would just randomly burst into tears, and it was over my marriage. It was over my job. It was over my dad. And it would just repeat, the whole way down. I think I cried 90% of the way down there. And then having that time alone at my cousin's place was just so therapeutic, because I could just cry when I needed to cry without having someone going, oh, are you okay? Because that's not always helpful either. Sometimes you just need to cry, feel that feeling, and just kind of like honor it, let it go, and for me that was helpful. But I didn't want to have to explain my feelings or my anger or whatever emotion was rolling through me. So for that, I felt really, really grateful that I had my cousin's place to be at in solitude. And so as my plan turned out, I didn't end up doing the cross country trek, but the time spent at his place was the therapy I needed. I think it was the solitude I needed. I just needed that time to process the prior 18 months of my dad dying, my marriage crumbling, my job being gone, and just kind of like, I don't know what's next. I don't know what's next. I had a family member say, yeah, when you just imploded your life, or your life blew up, or whatever she used for the term. And I guess, that's how it looked, but it couldn't be helped. Everything happened, in that year. And then I lost an aunt and an uncle, all within 11 months of losing my dad. So it was a tough year, needless to say. But, I had tools because I had done the Pathfinders training and facilitating, and kind of, so I knew what to look for in my own self, and ways to work through it that were healthy, and also had hospice training. So I think all of that combined was really helpful to me. So I just, wanted to encourage you, if you are at the point, or you're getting close to, that final kind of few days with your loved one. And, once you get through the funeral, and once you get through, all these things, it's so much that comes at you that, it's hard sometimes to just stop and go, okay, I need like an hour just to cry my eyes out. Probably not an hour, but do it, cry, honor it, let it go, move on. There's moments when I will just be driving to work in the morning, and this is 3 years later, and a song comes on the radio, and I'm sobbing my eyes out on my way to work, and I'm like, oh, that's pretty. I don't care, because if someone were to ask me, oh my goodness, are you okay? I'd be like, yeah. You know what? Had a moment, thought of my dad, I cried it out. I'm good. Now I can move forward with my day. I don't think to suppress that is healthy. So I hope you can seek out in your area, wherever you're at, if Google it. I will try to find some information and give you that information for grief support, maybe nationwide if I can. I haven't Googled it yet, but I will when I'm done, and try to put that information up for you. But just Google grief support in your area and see what comes up. And hopefully you can find a group that you can join, because it's very helpful. And it's helpful to hear other people's stories and to kind of know you're not alone. There's comfort in that, and to know that, this journey isn't, as solitary as it can be, it doesn't have to be completely. And that was one of the purposes. And I would just like to give a little shout out. My first grade teacher, Mrs. Brontes, was my favorite teacher. And that, you set the bar at first grade, and it's a pretty high bar. And, but fast forward a bunch of years, and I discovered that she and another woman were the ones that started this group Pathfinders, which just made me love her and Pathfinders even more. And what they discovered was that, children would go to school and be grieving for someone really important in their life, and there was nobody that could relate to that. They've got other 5 or 6 year olds that they're like, my dad died. Huh. What's another 6-year-old going to say to you that's going to comfort you that hasn't been through it? So the idea for this group was to get these children together in the same age group, and they could, and that is very helpful, to feel like you're not alone. Even if your loss is different, there's still that connection that you make with these kids, these other children, that makes you not feel so alone. and you can talk about different ways that you handle your grief and work through it and whatnot. So it's very helpful. So that's all I have for today. I just wanted to really stress the importance of getting yourself some support, or just to honor your grief and work through it, in a healthy way. It's easy to hit the bottle or other possible things to numb the pain, but I don't recommend that avenue, that street. Talk about it. Find someone you can talk to about it. Maybe you have a friend that has been through something similar, and the two of you can, sit down together and kind of tell each other your stories. There's a lot of help in that. So I wish you love and peace and happiness, and I hope this was helpful for you today. We'll see you next time. Thanks for joining me.